right, welcome to another Foil Drive podcast. It's been a while between drinks. We've been very busy here at Foil Drive. We just released our new Blue Highway film, which we've been premiering around the world. And today I'm lucky enough to have Paul Martin, the brains behind Foil Drive, the inventor, head of the company. And today I've got him in the booth talking about kind of Foil Drive responsibility and Foil Drive etiquette. I feel like with Foil Drive and Foil Assist getting very big, it's only right to kind of maybe talk about the few scenarios that are kind of getting people in trouble or people not knowing how far they can push the envelope with the product and just kind of building a good community and good responsibility around foil driving. So welcome to the show, Paul, and thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, mate. No, it's good to see you.
Is this no, you started off this podcast, so I can't really take the fame from you, but
no, that was that was Ben and Caitlin's doing.
Yeah.
I definitely didn't start the podcast.
But thank you for your time today. And I kind of just wanted to get across to our community. It's a lot of self-policing and regulating is going on. And that's kind of good, I think, in communities. Like some people are sticking their neck out being like, hey, I want to set the standard. However, I think it's as from the top down, we should maybe create, I hate using the word rules, but just saying standards because I think it's important for us to know what's kind of acceptable and what's not. And it's always going to vary from place to place and people to people, but let's kind of just, let's just jump straight into it. So I think the first thing I wanted to chat about was, foil driving. Like, do we have the right over other ocean users or where do we sit in the hierarchy?
Yeah, look, it's a dynamic question. And going back to something that you said before, we need to set the tone as self-proclaimed, I don't even know how you word it. We're the first to do something, so we're thrust into the position of, if you're the first to create a sport or a technology or a substance or whatever, you sort of, if you're at the forefront, you're at the forefront, comes in the territory. And I was thinking about this before. I created the first ever foil assist, and right back in the very early days of testing it, up until now, technically I've done the most foil assisting in the world from just a time period, and and far from the most amount of sessions. Like
how long is that?
Even close.
Sorry to cut you off, but how long is that?
Oh, well, about 5. Maybe it's hard to know exactly, 5 or 6 years, I suppose, if you bring in the real early tinkering before it was ever tried to be made a product. But well before that, for nearly 12 years, I've been making, up until I started Foil Drive, electric-powered surfboards. So I had to navigate electric-powered surfboard etiquette as well. But that never took off to a product, so it never really transcended the local beaches that I surfed at. So never went anywhere. And one day it will. I'll revisit that product, but not now. But where I'm coming from is I've seen it from when no one even knew what a foil drive was or foil assisting up until now. So I have a reasonably good handle on where I think it's changed. But coming back to what you're saying, like the responsibility of people to put up their hand and say, hey, like I'm going to make some suggestions, and in the purest sense, just trying to make sure that the sport for everyone has the best growth that it can, natural growth, but also just to make sure that other people can respect the technology. Because for me, having been involved in lots of different industries, and especially outside of foil drive, heavily involved in drones. I was the first ever person to get certified to fly drones in Australia. So, and believe me, that was a much more contentious technology than foiling is. So I've had a bit of experience with trying to you know, trailblaze technologies and try and navigate the best way you can through people's opinions, which vary massively.
Mm-hmm.
And opinions are often formulated without proper like research into something. And there's nothing worse than having opinions from people who don't even understand the technology or the process or the sport. But that's going to come whether you like it or not. So, no, I agree with you. We've got to look at how do we help foiling and assisted foiling, and also assimilate with other water sports to make sure it's all coherent.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Like I still, after every session, like it never gets old. Every time I come in from the beach, you always get that person. Hey, does that thing got a motor on it, or is that like
Yeah.
how does that thing work? And it's
Mm.
still people are still so oblivious to what a hydrofoil is. And like I
Yeah.
always sum it up by it's an aeroplane under your board. Like, you know, an
Yeah.
airplane needs a runway to take off. You know, the wave is giving you that runway or
Mhm.
whatever, like the you pulling the trigger on your motor is giving you that runway, and then once it gets up, it's flying. And then there's just like you can see their brain kind of ticking and going like, "Oh, that makes so much sense." Like, you know, that's so smart. And they're just like,
Yeah.
"Well, why are you jumping up and down then and stuff?" And I'm like, "Well, you think about it. If a plane is starting to dip, you know, if you unweight, it's going to come back up. Like if you take out the weight from the plane, it's going to come back up. Like it's just,
Yeah.
you know, it's just physics at the end of the day." And yeah, it's trying to, like what you said, people have these opinions that don't even understand exactly what's even going on. And then I even sometimes, like, you know, when you get that little bit of attitude, say, off, you know, maybe a surfer who's maybe not trying to tell you to get out of the water, but you can tell that they're disgruntled by what you're doing. And the way I look at it, and I'm just like, I don't know if this is just my point of view, but I'm just like, at the end of the day, I'm just on like another craft. I just have a huge fin under my board. You have 3 little fins under your board. What makes us the difference? I'm just selecting the craft that gets a million more waves than you. So you know, and I can honestly see where people get a bit more pissed off because maybe you have a battery and a motor connected to it. And I can see that. And that's kind of like where I'm trying to see from your opinion, where do we sit in the hierarchy? Because I always look at it as, you know, swimmers have the most right of way, just like when you're crossing a crosswalk, you know, the pedestrian has the right of way. Because you're in a car, you have brakes, you can stop, you know, versus someone who can walk across the road really slowly, they have the right of way. So I just look at it in that kind of priority list.
Look, it's a very complicated scenario to try and apply one set rules for almost any discipline, because situations and how people interpret situations will vary massively from all over the world. First of all, technology. Technology almost always, if you go back through history, gets a bad rap somewhere. Change is scary. It's fascinating for some. I'm in that category. I love change. I love to see new things. But for a decent percentage of the population, change it's daunting. There's this new thing. I don't understand this new thing. I'm used to my current thing, and I'd rather not see this new thing come along, because then I don't have to challenge myself to understand how that's going to affect me. Or do I have to evaluate this new thing to determine whether or not I should even do it? It's human science. I'm not going to go delving into all of that because it gets a bit nerdy and boring. But at the end of the day, technology, and again, I bring up the drone stuff because that was heavily technology saturated. We went through all sorts of issues because people didn't understand the technology. When, you know, it comes full circle, a lot of those people that initially had a lot of reservations about it actually loved the new technology, because when they gave it a chance, it had all these benefits that the previous methodology didn't have. So the way I look at it with foil driving is, okay, so there's no secret. We've got a motor and a battery. And we use that technology to our advantage to make it easier to get onto foil. So our end goal is, I just want, like me personally, my end goal is I want to go on the water and I want to get on foil as easily as I can on a smaller board and a smaller wing, and I want to catch as many waves as I can. That's my goal. So I can't achieve that in any meaningful way without it. I'm sure I could go and catch some little beachies and grovel around and, get up occasionally. But to me, that I have no interest in that. It's just doesn't fill my cup. I want to ride lots of waves and in lots of conditions. So the technology element is very different to the human element. So just because you're using technology doesn't necessarily mean you're doing anything wrong, nor does it mean you should be discriminated against. But it just comes with the territory. The first people to invent a steam-powered car were considered, these incredibly dangerous things when the horse and cart were used to dominate the roads. And they went through the same process. What I think people need to be mindful of is technology is not going to stop. Wheel drive is not the end of the road for water sports. There will be all sorts of other things invented in the future. We're just another piece of the puzzle that constantly evolves. And for me, I really like to try and remind people, try and look at it holistically and say, what am I really worried about here? So I'll bring up some examples. I've had, in the very early days, I had some surfers, and I'm not just singling out surfers, it just happens to be that the majority of people in the water are surfers. They would see me setting up on the beach and they'd come over and some would be very inquisitive. Oh, what's this? And, and you have a chat to them and they're excited for you and off they go. And then you could have another guy, same equipment, got a surfboard, ready to go in the water. He's a completely different opinion. He's like, I remember one guy's like, don't you dare come near me. You're not allowed in the water. That's illegal. All these just completely rubbish things. He was just making stuff up because he felt confronted. And I just said to him, look, mate, I don't know you. You don't know me, but I'll let you in a little secret. I won't be anywhere near you, buddy. You're on the inside catching the waves just before they turn into white water. I'll be about 700 meters further out catching groundswell, having the time of my life. Of course, he didn't want to hear any about that. Stormed off, disgruntled. I went in the water. I never saw the bloke. I don't know where he went, couldn't care less. I'm sure he saw me catching wave after wave after wave out in the back. And there was just no one out there because, as you know, unless you're on foil, no one can catch groundswell. So two different human beings, two very different opinions, and they all had the same outcome. We never saw each other. And it just shows straight away some people will bring a negative emotion to a new thing before they've seen it, before they've ever experienced it. They don't even understand it, yet they've made their mind up that it's going to be a bad thing, which is sad because it's not a really good way to grow.
I feel like that's a personality trait. That's like glass half empty versus glass half full. People maybe a little bit more narrow-minded than others, but do you think it's your responsibility as a foil driver / foiler to even go down that path of trying to educate maybe someone who doesn't totally understand what you're doing?
Well, it's your responsibility to go above and beyond, I think, because you're trailblazing, you're doing something new. It's going to be confronting for some other people around you. So just suck it up and accept the fact that you're going to have to maybe do a bit more than you do in the past. So what do I do personally? Yesterday, I was testing some stuff in the water, and I was doing some timed run time for battery efficiency and motor efficiency calculations. And my goal was to not come off foil, if at all possible. Walk in the water, set the GPS and timer, and do not stop until the battery was 100% depleted. That was the sort of framework that I was trying to operate to. and it was low tide, which typically no foilers go out, but I had no choice. It's the only time I had that day. And there must have been 40 surfers out there, split between two breaks that are very close together. So, and at the time I was like, geez, I really wish we were filming this, because this would be the perfect example of how to, operate in and around others without upsetting people. But I just picked my spot, and I knew that the takeoff, where there was a whole bunch of guys all heavily, densely packed, was the no-go zone. And there was another spot, again, dense guys, no-go zone. But in the middle, there was that perfect shoulder, which they couldn't ride because the wave face wasn't aggressive enough for a surfboard in the pocket. So coming back to your question, like, what are you responsible for doing? First of all, you're responsible for just like looking at the situation and saying, whether you're a foil driver or not, like you could just be normal foiling. Am I going to paddle over and go right in the middle of all these surfers or not? Now, that doesn't mean that just because you're a foiler, assuming you don't have a foil drive, for example, just because you're a foiler doesn't mean you don't have a right to use the ocean. You don't have a right to paddle into a wave. Like, I believe you 100% do. As you said before, it's just a different craft. But it's also just comes down to, like, I look at surfers and say, I'm not trying to be rude, like they're almost handicapped because they need such an aggressive wave face and so much energy to even get going. And then they need that wave face to sustain their surfing. It's a very small window of opportunity for them to get on the wave and stay on the wave. So as a foiler, I go, I don't need that takeoff zone. I don't need that highly energetic wave face. So why go there? That's if you were saying, oh no, I really want that, well, then I think you're probably erring on the side of just being a bit greedy. Because if you don't need it, and I personally think you can have almost just as much fun on the shoulder of a wave as you can in a pocket, you're just asking for trouble, or go look for a different spot. So first of all, I just picked my spot. And then second of all, I actually, I couldn't do it yesterday because I was trying to do that sustained flight thing. But if I come down a foil and there's anyone that's in my area, that sometimes surfers will surf on the inside or wherever they don't want to be in the crowd, I actually make the effort to go up to them, just motor up to them, and to say, look, if you're going for a wave and you see that I'm already on it, go. Do not worry if you're not dropping in on me. I will catch every single wave that comes through if I want to. There's no consequence to me to start and stop. So if you want to go, you just go. And they're like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah, it's totally fine. And that just de-escalates any tensions that they might be feeling because they haven't even spoken to you. Because you're just, like in my case, I can just do lap after lap after lap because I just keep rolling in. But if I don't make the effort to at least tell the guy or girl, hey, look, you just go. If you think you can get the wave, you go. And I actually tell them that because I can see they don't know if they're in the wrong by trying to go for a wave that I'm already on.
I think that's such an important point. I think a lot of people, especially coming from my heavily surf background, are very standoffish. You can paddle out into a lineup and people don't even want to make eye contact with you because I don't know if it's like a localism thing or, they're scared to put their foot wrong somewhere. But I think
weird, eh?
Breaking down those boundaries and especially being a foil driver, there's communities now where there might be 2, 3, 5 foil drivers and usually they try to go out together and it can be pretty busy in that sense. But if you're just that local foil driver where, you're going out after work for a quick 30 minutes and you're on foil for 30 minutes because in between waves, if you're not pumping, you're motoring around, you're really not having any interaction with the surfers. And even though you might be catching waves out the back that are ground swells and then peeling off before you get to them, the surfers might still be put off by you coming into them. and it might put them off paddling for a wave. So I think that's such an important point and like for me at my local place that I foil drive at a lot, I'll come down off foil, do exactly what you said, have a chat, or else I'm just solely going out and not interacting with anyone, which is nice. Sometimes I want to do that. Sometimes I just don't want to talk to anyone. I've had a big day at work. I want to just foil drive around and catch heaps of waves. But it also is a really nice way to just have a chat to someone. And I always, and this is maybe a little bit irresponsible, but I'm always like, you want to have a go? Even if they have no idea. And I'm like, you want to have a go? And I'm like, they're like, what do I do? And I'm like, just pull the trigger and it just goes. And I'm just like, oh. So I think like, it's important to, it's important to communicate, because so many things can be de-escalated by just having that conversation. And like so many people avoid that because maybe they're introverted, they don't want to talk to people. But I think, even just a kind hello, or as you're going past, if you don't even want to come off foil, just be like, hey, catch whatever wave you want, you're not in my way. Like, you can say that in 2 seconds.
Exactly. And look, the reality is, and I know this for a fact, because we have certain breaks where the surfers just sit there, and I'm not taking anything away from surfing. I used to do it, and we'll be out there for 2.5, 3 hour session, and they'll just sit around and catch a handful of waves. And they'll watch us out the back, as you just said before, catching waves and then peeling off well before, when I say well before, at least 50 meters before they even start thinking about a wave. So there's no way we're going to hit anyone. It's just natural envy that they can't avoid, watching a bunch of us having the time of our life, ha-hooing and carrying on and, just shredding, having the best time. It's just natural envy to look at someone and go, wow, they are having a lot more fun than I am. And some people take that well and some people don't. And there's not a huge amount you can do for those that don't, other than try and be kind. And I've had a few extremely grumpy guys that are clearly just, I don't know, maybe they're pissed off from work or something else is going wrong, and we're just making it worse by having fun when they're not. I'll come off foil, and on the rare occasion that I have to go on the inside, come back out, and I'd say, do you want a tow? Like, what?
That's a great one.
I'd say, just grab on the leggy, I'll tow you out. And they're like,
great one.
Oh, okay. And then, sure enough, you tow them out. And they're like, thanks, mate. And it just, they just weren't ready for it. Like, aren't you my enemy? I'm like, no, I'm not your enemy. I'm just a guy having fun on a different craft. But do you want a tow? Not many people turn it down. only the saltiest of salty ones do, but it's that works quite well sometimes. No, especially when it's a long paddle. Yeah.
I've got one to challenge you on that sometimes I have a little bit of trouble navigating. And I think that was a really good point, you saying like catching these ground swells before you get to the breaking wave, and maybe opting for a more high aspect foil because they can glide and match those ground swells a bit better. But say you want to surf foil on your foil drive and you want to get close to the white water breaks, and that there might be a handful of people surfing. How would you say to navigate that lineup when maybe space is limited? Like maybe you live in a city beach. Do you just completely, you think that it's like a no-go, like that's not allowed, or is there a way to kind of work together with this crowd?
Yeah, good question. So we are quite spoilt down our way, and I suppose your way to a degree. We've got a lot of coast. There's a lot of waves. We don't have so much of that problem. So you're right. There are there's plenty of places around the world that have very dense, congested surf spots, and it's not that practical or just not possible sometimes to do the groundswell thing. I think you have to be pragmatic about it and say, okay, so if we're all competing for the same resource, which is what Mother Nature provides, is a couple of takeoff zones, and I'm choosing not to use a normal board, and I'm choosing not to use just a normal powered foil, and I'm going to use a foil drive, then yes, I have an advantage over others. That doesn't make you wrong. If someone chose to ride to the surf on a bicycle and you chose to go to the surf in a car, you have just opted to use a different form of technology and craft to get to the surf. They're well-established technologies, so no one seems to delineate the difference between those. Now, if I arrived on the beach in a helicopter and got off, just totally balling out of a yacht, you're going to upset some people because that's unusual and X, Y, Z. Now, that doesn't happen very often. But if you really find yourself in that situation and you want to surf foil and you want to enjoy the ocean, which is your right, then I think your only opportunity to keep it peaceful and not have people getting upset is to just take your share. So if you look around and you find that the average guy is getting a handful of waves every X minutes or whatever it ends up being, try and fit in with that. I mean, do you have to catch absolutely everything? No. That's a choice-based thing. It's not a result of technology. Try and mix it in. And just talk to people. Like if you're in there and you say, look, guys, I'm on a foil, I've got my motor. Look, I'm going to catch a wave every now and then, just like you guys. And just giving you the heads up, I use it because it allows me to actually get on foil and not stuff it up. Like how many waves globally would go to waste because people try and catch it and they don't? A lot. So there's an argument to say, look, for the waves that I go for, I will be catching them and they won't go to waste, but I'm going to try and take my fill. Now, I used to do that when I was building my electric surfboards 10 plus years ago. Again, because I could catch them much earlier than anyone else, but the wave wasn't really interesting to ride until it was basically the same spot that everyone was taking off on. Why? Because that's where the wave's walling up and it's forming, and that's where you can have the fun on it. So I had to do exactly that back then. I knew I could catch every single wave that I wanted, but I had to let a whole heap go through to let other people have a turn because they knew my board was electric. It's pretty obvious. So that's how I did it. And I did it for years and I didn't have very many problems at all because it was just surf etiquette. Surf etiquette is not something that is affected by technology. Surf etiquette is surf etiquette. It's just often abused by people that don't understand it because they've got access to technology. And that goes well outside of surf and foiling. People abuse common sense with technology all the time because they don't understand the relationship between being a decent human being and not sometimes. So that's how I view it. I don't know if you agree with it, but I don't think there's a huge amount more you can do.
Yeah, one way that I found, and this was only from trying to be super efficient, like been riding my Slim, and because you can't just motor around nonstop as if you're on a max, I treated it very much as if you were just normal prone foiling. So I would maybe use cruise control to get out the back, or not, or just paddle like a normal
good point.
thing.
Good point.
You're acting as if you're. This sounds so silly, but like you're one of the other ocean users, like a surfer. So you'll interact as if you're a surfer, like you're paddling back out or you're cruise controlling back out. You're not like motoring and making heaps of noise. Sit out the back as if you're a surfer. And then exactly what you said, like when I go for a wave, I'm never going to miss it. Versus when you paddle for a wave, there's maybe 50% chance that you get it or not. So, and then they don't, maybe it's like a mental thing. Like they kind of like respect it because they're just like, oh, okay, like he's just using this tool to catch the wave, not get I guess you're still going to catch a lot of waves, but you're also going to just be super efficient. And then maybe you can stay on your foil drive for like 3 hours because you're not just burning battery. You're being super efficient. So you're going to be out there for ages. And I know a lot of guys that I met in Hawaii, that is how they use their foil drives. They're not like And because Hawaii is definitely a place where, lineups are very, very busy. So I thought that was super clever. And I was actually blown away by some of the ride times that some of these guys were saying they were getting. They were like, oh, yeah, my session's like 3 hours. And I'm like, what? I was like, my session is usually like 30 or 40 minutes because literally I'm on my feet the whole time. Like I do not come down. Like once I go out, I'm up. But I'm just like, it definitely like, it spun my mind. And I was just like, there's no need to be super greedy. Like, unless like if the time calls for it, like if you've got a sandbank where there's no surfers, go on foil for 40 minutes, come in, change a battery, go back out for another 40 minutes. But if you're in a lineup that's super busy, you don't want to be disrespectful. Treat yourself as if you're a surfer and, you're just paddling back out, catching a wave, using the foil drive to get onto the wave. That's it. And then you're foiling.
Yeah. It's just deflammatory in the form of it's not visually different. So when I had my electric surfboards, I used to do exactly that because it was way more intermixed. I was basically going through their lineup. I was basically catching them near enough where they were. So I was right in the mix. I couldn't use the technology to separate myself like you can with foil drive, which is a point we'll get onto in a minute. But I would, just dial in a little bit of power and it would be at paddle speed. And I'd not pretending to use my arms because I didn't really need to.
Karate chop.
But I was sort of just like cruising. And everyone was chill. Everyone knew I had it. But if I had, sometimes I get because I had shoulder injuries and whatnot, which is the whole reason I build these things. I couldn't really move my arms that much. I used to sometimes dial up a little bit more power and just rest my arms on the board and just motor out. And when I did that, you could see more and more people looking and taking notice, and they didn't do a huge amount more, but it was very much a visually different thing. There's this board just motoring like itself versus this subconsciously there's a guy seeming to be paddling out reasonably quick, but whatever. So you're 100% right, and it's a great way to fit into the crowd is to just cruise out nice and slow, wait your turn, catch your wave, have fun. And I think it's a different way of achieving the same result. Like take your fill and share. You shouldn't have problems. Not with rational people anyway. You will always find the occasional person that just can't deal with change, and there's not much you can do for those people. You certainly don't want to pander to them because that would be a pretty boring world. Which is
well, the next thing that I was kind of the next point that I kind of was thinking about was not so much stealing other people's resources by this tool. It's more I was thinking down the line of noise pollution. Like, going to a place and hearing a few foil drives, especially people that aren't as experienced on a foil drive. So you hear just like it is noise pollution. Like, if you go down to a beach and you're having a picnic and you just start hearing like all these sounds like a 2-stroke engine sometimes just going. So how would you step around that one?
Well, that is just a learning curve. So I went foiling with a bunch of guys in Queensland last week. There was 8 of us all out there on foil drive Gen 2s. And there was a few surfers off to the right, maybe, 200 metres away. Again, we were catching waves that no one else could catch. But I was one of the 8, so I witnessed 7 different levels of competency on foil drive. Some were doing a very good job at it, where they had worked out that just keep the pod submerged and it's a lot more efficient. And others were still just trying to learn their way through, and the motor's going in and out and rant, 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 rant. And for those few that were doing it, I should try to give them tips and to say, look, just back the throttle off, let the pod sink into the water, and if you use less throttle, you won't be coming in and out all the time. Because the reason you're coming in and out all the time is you've got too much throttle on. So it's building up speed, excess lift, come out, lose lift because they've lost thrust, comes back in, and you rinse and repeat. It just keeps doing it. So for some people, it's just a matter of a few more sessions to get their head around it, and then they can do that. But then there's other people that just don't understand that it is an irritant to someone else. Why? Because they're standing on a board having the time of their life. They're not thinking about other people. So that's, again, it just comes back to common decency and surf etiquette. What I mean surf etiquette, I mean like just respecting other people in the water. If you're just not capable of keeping the motor submerged and keeping it quiet, then practice that. Like, don't expect other people to constantly give you, throw you a bone or just give you leniency if you're not being respectful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've chosen to use the technology, then it's your responsibility to do the best you can with that technology to reduce the impact. Only yesterday, I think I was telling you before about that session I was doing that test, it was almost zero wind, dead quiet. You could hear people talking to each other on the other break, sort of quiet. And I made an extremely concerted effort to run the pod below the surface of the water at all times with very minimal breaching. And fortunately, because it was so calm, that was actually quite easy to do. But I knew that if I was being lazy and rant, that would piss people off. So I was like, don't do it. Run it lower, keep it in the water. And I would build my speed up because some of these waves are quite rounded early on because I was catching them further out. I'd build my speed up, keep the pod submerged, and then deliberately pop up and shut off at the same time. It was whisper quiet. Now, I'm aware about all that stuff. I think about it. I know how to handle the motor so I could achieve it. But yeah, it's just an understanding thing. But look, the world's a noisy place. Yes, it introduces a bit of noise, but what are we going to do? Ban everything and everything that someone doesn't like at some point? Like, that's one thing that I really do struggle with in this world sometimes, is just how obsessed humanity's getting with, if it doesn't please someone somewhere, or they find it offensive somewhere, let's just ban it. It's like, that's insane. This world's not going to get any less diverse and complicated as technology increases. But if we keep trying to pander to the few that might have a problem, we're going to have a miserable existence in the future. Like, you won't be able to do anything. And the only things you will be able to do are the things that people approve. And those people that approve it are typically the ones that whinge the most. I don't want to hang out with that mob. But the fine line, like, and I don't think there's a right answer that will please everyone.
I think what I can really extrapolate from that is just to like, that might just not even be on people's minds. Like, maybe they just don't even know. So I think what's good about this conversation is that with the foil drive, there does come noise with it, and if you're hearing an excessive amount of noise, it probably means that you're not using it in the best way that you can. So it's like important for you to learn how to be efficient and smart with your mast height adjustment. So
yeah, it's a learning thing.
It's a learning thing.
Nearly everyone does it when they start. And most of the people that I foil with don't do it now because they get it. They're like, I'm just cooking this up. Back it off, submerge it. You get better drive, you get better efficiency, you get better runtime. Once you crack it, you don't go back. There's no need to go back. But I think it's similar to, like, it might not be noise, but how annoying is it when there's new people learning to surf, catching waves in front of you, cooking it up all the time, and there's a board, this big male, and there's leg ropes going everywhere right in front of the takeoff zone. That's annoying. You can't just ban new people from surfing because they're an inconvenience.
Yeah.
No one would ever progress. So, I don't know. We just use common sense. Like, it doesn't need to be that hard. But I think you're right. A lot of people are maybe a little bit immune to it because they're just having so much fun.
I get that. I think another thing that really comes to mind that I've witnessed as well is kind of what you just explained before, how when you just were away, a group of 8 foil drivers, like, that's a spectacle. That is
It
something
was.
that looks like Back to the Future type thing.
It
So
was a lot of fun, actually.
it's like a little rat pack, and the way that I envision it is like, I don't know if you've ever been to the snow, but when you go down the hill with your buddies and you're all hitting all different like burns and jumps, and you all stop and you wait like, oh look at Jimmy just did that, or like Josh just did this,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
so fun. It's honestly so fun. But I've also seen crew not being happy with that because
Yep.
maybe when you're in a big group like that, you do get a bit carried away because you all want to show off to each other how good you are and what tricks you can do. And yeah, what do you have to say about that? Like, what do you have to say about like party? Like, I know the other day, I was actually up Gold Coast the other day, and I was foiling with Piros, who's an amazing foil drive ambassador. He lives and breathes foil drive. I love the guy to death. He's so funny. But dude, when he gets on a wave with you, I don't want to be anywhere near him. He is coming at you Mach 10, and I'm just like, okay, I get it. We're on the same wave, but I want to get off this wave now. But yeah, what do you have to say about like, yeah, is there an etiquette on like party waves, or is there an etiquette on like how many people you go out with in the surf? Or like, I know it's super grey and there's no one who can say yes or no to whatever, but what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I know when we all get together down here, South Australia, there can be 6 of us at most, maybe 7. We just use common sense where it's like foiling a spot where others aren't is your first priority, if you can. Now, again, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but down this way, we have plenty of opportunity to go lots of different places where others can't foil. So it's a non-event. When there are other people out there, we typically try and go further out the back, but they can't catch the waves. Now, at that point, the only thing we're doing that we can't really sort of help much with is the occasional, the motors coming in and out. If there's normally any sort of wind or weather, it muffles it pretty good. But if it's a dead silent day, it's a bit hard to think. Look, you only live once. Everyone wants to enjoy themselves. We're in the water for enjoyment. If you're trying to please other people as your primary goal at all times, it's going to be a pretty miserable experience. Like it'll always be. But common sense, like again, surf etiquette is a global thing, and it changes from place to place. There's gangs of guys that think they own the wave that are incredibly aggressive, rude, obnoxious people that make it a misery for anyone else to even think about going in the water. That's got nothing to do with technology. They just think it's okay to be a bunch of assholes to anyone that thinks that they're going to go near their wave. So it can go both ways. But coming back to foil drive, like I went out with Piros as well. We had 8 of us out there. They had already made the conscious decision they were going to go and foil a spot at Kira. There was no other surfers there. No one. But they were like 200 or 300 meters off to the right or way further down. Now, they picked that spot because it's a rounded swell and it's not really a good surfing wave. They're using common sense. They found a good spot that they liked. It also suited. That's one of the weird things. Foil driving is a different sort of element of the sport. You're not really looking for an aggressive, peaky wave typically. It's sort of more about swell lines that last as long as possible because you can ride them for as long as they're there. So, which sort of brings us on to a slightly different topic, in my opinion, is like as the technology changes and the way that you use the technology, it sort of opens up new avenues to do different things. So there might be packs of us down south in Adelaide that go foiling, but by default, because we've got a foil drive, we've got this technology that allows us to catch waves and go wherever we like. We are removing ourselves from the lineup typically. So we've been talking a lot about how do you interact with a lineup or how do you interact with other people in the water and etiquette and that sort of stuff. And I can only speak for our experience, but for the large majority of the time, we no longer participate in the conventional lineup because we don't want to be there. I have no interest in competing with other people for waves, and I have no interest in catching the last 10 or 20% of that swell that is a wave. So we're indirectly removing congestion by using foil drive typically, because you can go catch other parts of the wave or swell that is normally not on offer. So I think as much as some people like to harp on about the negative side of things, they don't often think about the other side of the coin, which is, I can speak for us down in this part of Australia, we're actually reducing congestion because we're now using sections of the coast and swells and breaks that just would go unridden. There was no one there. So, and that's what I remind some, I haven't had to do it often, but I've had some people, getting upset about it. Again, before they've even seen it, they haven't even met me. They're just talking to me in the car park. And I've said to them, just remember, like, because I'm using this, I'm not going to be foiling where you are. If I wasn't using the motor, the first thing I'm going to do is paddle out and sit right next to you in the lineup to try and catch the same wave that you're wanting to catch, because I have no choice.
Mm-hmm.
And when that sinks in, you can see them contemplating that process of, well, this can go only two directions. One, you and I are competing for the same wave, or two, we go off and do our own thing. So, and again, we have the luxury of that down here because we've got lots of different coastline to do that. And I'm not saying everyone around the world has that ease of choice, but I think it's an important point that the foil drive technology, if used appropriately and well, is actually improving the majority of people's foiling, surfing, supping, bodyboarding, whatever experience, because we're no longer partaking in those primary takeoff zones, is my experience anyway.
No, I totally agree. Yeah. And I think the next step beyond that, if people are interested, is the whole downwind playing field. That's endless amounts of areas that no one's going to inhabit. Like, you're lucky if you come across someone else that's out there and you're excited to try and catch the same wave or bump as them. So it's just, it's literally, it's kind of just, we got like the vision needs to stop being seen as your typical traditional surfer. It's like, think outside the box and think of like, where else can you have fun? I know someone, like a foil drive ambassador who's like really good at this is Jeremy Wilmot. He even still blows my minds with like, he'll be like, "Oi, dude, that wave that's off that point?" And I'm like, "Dude, that's not even a wave." And he's like, "Yeah, but it's like got backwash and it pushes back out to sea. And I really want to try that with the foil drive." And I'm just like, he's really good at thinking outside the box, because like he'll want to surf places that no one else even thinks about. But it's kind of cool, and I think that's the mentality that we should really gravitate towards, because so many people are like, "Oh, there's 10 guys surfing that bank there. That's where I want to surf." And it's like, well, no, you don't have to do that. That's what you used to have to do when you surfed. But now it's like, hey, today we can downwind. Today we can ride those ground swells that are off the back of that fat bank.
Upwind, wake thief, everything.
Yes, exactly. It's endless.
Yeah. Technology is a fantastic thing, and it's not going to go away. It's just all about how it's used. Nuclear can power a home or it can destroy a home. Like, it's a technology. It just comes down to how people choose to interact with it. And I think on balance, foil drive is a very positive thing. But the reality is this: most people are very good, common, decent human beings. They just are. But no one reports on the today 500 foil drivers foiled around the world and nothing happened. The end. Doesn't make for a very, clickbaity post. But you get one guy that has an altercation with someone else, and that's all someone wants to talk about. It's sad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's a lot of the times these things are taken out of context. And to be clear, we're not actually having, not that I'm aware of, any fundamental problems either. We're just, as you said rightly at the beginning, trying to take the stance of educating community and educating people that foil drive, surf, whatever it is, how can we all coexist and enjoy this epic ocean that we all like to and play with together? Because, we need to get along first.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing we want is regulators or people that don't understand our sport being asked to get involved because people are having tiffs with each other. And then, that is the last thing you want. Is some bureaucrat getting involved because, it's getting crowded. And then they start calling the shots. They don't even understand the difference between a surfboard and a foil.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go down that path.
Dangerous.
It's silly. You guys are suffering from it in Sydney.
Yeah, and we actually had a pretty interesting experience the other day. We weren't foil driving, but we were foiling, and the beach is closed. So when the beach is closed, we're allowed to do whatever we want, which kind of blows my mind, because if they're deeming the beach closed, it's probably more dangerous than what it was before, but we're allowed to do what we want. So we took this, foil drive kind of responsibility etiquette style thing, and we foiled in this bank where it had a chip in, and then we went off to the side where no surfers were, because it was fat rolling waves. They couldn't catch it.
Yep.
We stuck to our own lane. We were coexisting with another water user. Everything was totally fine. And I was saying to Jeremy that I wonder if surfers even know that we're banned here. I bet you they're just why do these foilers always come out towards the end of the night or super early in the morning? I bet you they're just that's so odd. Why do they do that? But it just showed that we could coexist, but like what you said before, they're not going to report on that. They're not going to report on, today the foilers got along with the surfers great. There was no injuries. There was actually an injury from a Mao rider getting run over by another Mao rider, but let's not report on that.
It's old. No,
that's old news. That's been happening forever in the day.
Yep. I've been surfed over too. I've never had a foil hit me.
Yeah.
Not saying it can't happen, but I got surfed over plenty of times, and it shouldn't be a surprise.
And I'm not, I've been run over by
spot.
surfers too, and I'm not calling out, let's ban surfers. I'm just
No.
I think that's just, we got to expect, if we're going in the water, that these are the dangers that potentially could be. And if you're so frightened that is a potential danger, you probably shouldn't go in the water, or you should swim between the flags, or you should go to somewhere where that there's no present danger. But we live in such a nanny state these days that people love to be protected by rules and bans, and if something's out of the norm for them, they want to say that you can't do it. So it's
and we have to stand up. Doesn't matter what discipline you enjoy, you have to stand up and make sure you can protect your right to do your own water activity without being, put in this box of control, which this world is so obsessed with doing. Because once the box is made, it's very hard to get rid of it. And that's what I've said to some people that are you shouldn't be allowed to do this, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. And I've just said, look, just be very careful how much you wish for a regulation and a ban to come in, even if it's against something you don't like. You're opening Pandora's box. Mm-hmm. As soon as you set that precedent and your leg rope snaps on your surfboard one day and it goes trundling in on a wave and it hits a little kid in the head, and that little kid's dad just happens to be a super high-profile lawyer, and he's up in arms about his injured child, which it's not that hard to happen. And, no one wants their leggy to slap, but they do. Next minute, that precedence that someone might have set to have surfers banned in Sydney, foilers banned in Sydney, could turn around and mean next minute there's a ban for surfers or something, or whatever the sport is. I keep saying surfers only because it's the majority of people in the water, but you just don't want to go down that path. It's as soon as you set that precedence, bang, it's, they did it for that, we do it for this. And again, most of those people that make these rules and implement these changes don't do anything in the water. They don't care.
Doesn't affect them.
No. All they want is problem off their desk and move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
So I recommend everyone needs to get along, and if they've got an issue, just sort it out together as common, decent people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you'll come to a resolution. It's not that hard. There's been plenty of discussions in the car park for many decades that I'm sure will continue to happen. Just don't go and ask for red tape in our water sports.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, but I like to go in the ocean, go foiling to get away from all that modern burden that we all live with. I just want to go in the water and ride a wave,
Mm-hmm.
nothing else. So let's not complicate it.
Yeah, no,
I think that's pretty fair.
I totally agree. I think that leads me to the next point of me in Sydney and like the foilers in Sydney, we weren't fortunate enough to protect our sport before we even got into it. It was banned. They just went straight up. Visually, it looks dangerous. We're banning it. So we didn't even have an incident or an altercation that it turned into that. So I think, as you're kind of recommending now, we need to kind of stand up and protect our sport. How would you kind of go about that? Because I know in some groups and WhatsApp platforms and stuff like that, forums, people are very much pointing the finger at others, saying you can't do this, you can do that. That I feel like is really breeding bad kind of. It's not. I feel like it's not the right way of doing things. Like people hate being told what to do, and this is like exactly where it's coming from the ban. So if like foilers are telling other foilers, hey, you can't do this, you can do that. Like who gives the power to who, and how would you go about protecting our sport but not pissing off our friends in the community? Or
it's it's a very fine line to walk, because a lot of this is not based on common sense. It's such a difficult thing to reason with unreasonable opinions. Like it's really difficult when you're dealing with a common sense approach. You're trying to apply that reasoning to a person that might be disgruntled for just their own personal reasons. It's a very difficult thing. So my recommendation is to say, okay, let's look at reality. Let's forget about opinion. Let's forget about, I've been doing this for 30 years, and hell will freeze over before I change sport and do something else. Let's just say, well, okay, what does the statistics say? Look at the maths. Maths doesn't really care what race you are, what your background is. It's just a bunch of numbers, and it works really well. And again, why am I talking like this? I used to work in the aviation industry. We used to do incredibly complicated risk assessments and risk matrices, trying to apply, the perceived risk versus current and all that sort of stuff. And it really, a lot of it just came down to the math. If you look at the amount of injuries that have been reported in foiling, now I don't know of many. If you looked at the amount of injuries being reported in surfing, it's probably a lot more. Why? Because there's just a lot more people doing it. But I still, to this day, don't understand how the ban in Sydney was even substantiated. Like, show me the events. What actually happened? I don't think anything did. As you said, you were just...
We got...
Someone got upset that, there's a new sport, and, there's probably seen people pumping around and linking waves going, there's no way I can do that. And they've had a cry to someone, and boom, next minute, there's this thing in place. That's just not fair. 100% it's not fair. Because if you looked at the mathematics, it's probably far more dangerous associated with crowded surf lineups than it is foiling tech or craft that can go elsewhere, or even if it is in the lineup. So you need to, I'm prattling on here, but it's like you need to say, steer away from opinion and steer away from, how you feel, and ask for evidence. I say, okay, well, show me the evidence. This happened in Hawaii. They were trying to ban certain things, and thankfully, common sense prevailed in the. I don't know. It was like it wasn't a court hearing as much as it was like a. You know the one I'm talking about.
You show me on your desk. Yeah.
I forget what it was. It was like an open public forum to talk about some rules that they were tending to put in, and it got absolutely crushed unanimously because it turned out there was one or two people having a whinge about foiling or powered foils. I think mainly were e-foils. And they were just trying to ban it for everyone. And it got opposed like, I don't know, 200 to 1 or something like that. But again, it was like there's no hard evidence to say that it's any more dangerous than anything else. So if it's just the opinion of the few, why should we pander to that and ruin it for everyone else? There's plenty of things in this world that are dangerous, like driving a car isn't exactly safe, but you can't just ban cars for the occasional accident. And I think foiling, unfortunately, is getting far more eyes on it for the wrong reason, which is because it's three-dimensional. It's totally different. Supping, surfing, kayaking, bodyboarding, they all share the same two-dimensional plane. You can't go three-dimensionally long term anyway. You can do the occasional aerial, but if you think about it, they're all two-dimensional. Foiling has the height, that third dimension where you can actually change your height and whatnot. So it's so different. It just naturally falls into a category of, wow, this thing is totally left of field. It's so different in so many ways. It must be X, Y, Z. And it gets labeled with that, which is unfortunate. But you can't really get away from that other than try and defend your position. You know, and again, technology is often just mislabeled.
Yeah.
I've had these discussions. I'm like, I'm actually further away from you than I ever have been because I foil in my own spots now because of the technology. I don't have any interest in the crowded lineups anymore.
Yeah.
And when I talk to them about that, not that I've had many of these discussions, but when they have come up, most people agree that that's a really good point. I didn't think of it like that. But a lot of people don't give it the time of day. They sort of formulate an opinion based on what they heard or saw in a forum or just a feel, and that's as much as they consider it because it doesn't affect them long term, which is, you know, human nature, unfortunately.
Do you feel like it's fair that we're getting classed in an e-foil category?
No. Just like if you go to a mountain bike park, if someone turns up with a motorbike and they're burning around at high speed for a long period of time, covering lots of distance on a 100-kilo motorbike, it's not the same as a 25-kilo electric mountain bike that's doing a lot less speed. It's predominantly actually only going up the hill and then back down. It's not traversing up and across and up here and down. And like, everyone knows the difference between a motocross bike and a mountain bike. It's clear. E-foils are e-foils. We have never advertised that we're an e-foil. We're not. We're a foil assist. Our primary use is to get going and then turn it off. A foil drive is at its best when it's not in use, is like my throwaway line. Like once you've got going and you shut it down, that's actually the whole purpose of it, is to not use the motor. The motor is just a byproduct of getting to where you want to be, which is free foiling. So I can see how we get lumped into that category, and I can see how people have been upset with e-foilers coming into surf breaks as they cruise down the coast, and they need constant motor power for most part. Like occasionally some people can sort of pretend to be foiling with the motor off and they've got the controller dangling, like, look at me, sick of those photos. But and then the next minute they're foiling at speed straight back out and they're doing loop after loop. It's an e-foil. It's not a foil assist. Anyone that's got half a brain can pick the difference. The problem is the people that don't understand the difference between a foil and a surfboard and an e-foil and a foil driver, all four of them, a lot of the times these are the people that are actually making decisions on stuff. And that's, you can see how they get lumped together. But no, we're 100% in a different category. It was as far as I see it anyway.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there for sure. I think that's such a good, simple way of explaining it. And I think a lot of people will understand that after they hear that.
Yeah.
Can you think of anything else that we've missed in this chat? We're kind of running on like over an hour now, like an hour and 10. Can you think of anything that we need to kind of touch on?
I'd just like to commend the overwhelming majority of everyone that actually has a foil drive. I think considering we have, I don't know how many it is, but maybe 5,000 or 6,000 individual foil drives out there, something like that. To have that many units out there in the world. And again, this chat comes across like maybe some people perceive there is lots of negativity out there. That it actually isn't. There's isolated pockets, which you're going to get with any sport. But for the overwhelming majority, the feedback we get from our customers are how much they've enjoyed being able to not have to foil where they used to. We'll get emails daily from people that just send in their feedback, unsolicited feedback, talking about how much they enjoy the freedom of being able to go and find their own breaks and surf their own spots and go when the tide's not right, or the wind is a bit too offshore. Whereas in the past, you're done. You can't stay on the wave face. And now it doesn't matter. You get the place to yourself. And that's the reality. The majority of people are having a lot of fun away from the normal crowds and away from the normal spots and having an absolute ball. That's often not reported on because it's not sensationalized. Unfortunately, media and clickbait stuff this day and age is pretty much, it has to be negative if you're going to get a click on it for the most part. So I actually think I've been really happy with just how well the product's been accepted globally and used. And considering just how transformative it actually is as a product and what it can, like, it can take you from being, me for example, without foil drive, do very little foiling. I just don't have the shoulder strength anymore with all the injuries I've had. Then you bolt it on and I can do lots of foiling. Considering how much that's changed the game for me, I'm amazed at how well it's done globally with it assimilating into normal surf water culture. And I think it will continue to do quite well. But we also just need to remember that we're creating a new industry and a new product genre. As you said at the very beginning of the call, like, it's up to us to put the best foot forward and set a good example. And I think we're doing an okay job of that. It takes lots of time and effort and discussions like this to continue that good work. But I just encourage people to not get too carried away with focusing on the technology and spend a little bit more time on just assessing the individual, their understanding of what they are or aren't doing, and talk to someone. Don't have a big whinge to someone else who's got nothing to do with it. Talk to the human being. Like, most people are pretty decent. I do remember there was this one customer in Hawaii reached out and just said, look, there's this one guy here who's just falling through the lineup and being an absolute idiot. What are you going to do about it? I said, well, look, I'm in Australia. There's not much I can do about it. We did send the guy an email and say, look, you're upsetting people and we would encourage you to practice some more common decency. It's all seemed to have subsided now. I don't know if they sorted it out, but I'm like, you guys are going to have to talk to each other and deal with this. Don't go to the police and regulate it. Not that they did, but like, talk to the human. Deal with it. There's been plenty of altercations in just normal surfing for decades. I'm sure they've dealt with it in the car park. We're all humans.
Yeah, I feel like this might be so much of an issue when there's more foil assists, because instead of just pointing the finger, oh, that guy's on a foil drive, let's call up Foil Drive and be like, why are you giving these people products that don't use them irresponsibly? It's like calling up, who can I say, it's like calling up Al Merrick if you see a surfer doing the wrong thing and being like, Al Merrick, why did you sell that guy aboard? Like, he's been irresponsible. Like, it's just, I'd be like, you're just the target right now because you're the industry leader, you're the industry inventor, and it's just like it's easy to point a finger straight at you. So people need to take responsibility and just practice happy, safe water using.
Look, embrace it. I think one thing I like to remind people is Mother Nature has given us a set amount of coastline, a set amount of waves, and that's not changing in our lifetime. So I think the amount of people that are going to be doing water sports is not going to go down, it's going to go up. So there's a few things that need to happen. One of the ones that needs to happen is congestion needs to be alleviated. Now, I would argue foil drive, if used appropriately and just with common decency, is the one technology that actually has a chance to reduce congestion above all other product. Period. Period. That doesn't include wind sport, because obviously when the wind comes up, you could foil a kite or whatever all over a big bay. I'm talking about if you're dealing with waves in a specific spot where the wave has to hit a reef or a sandbank or something to form, that isn't going to change. We actually bring congestion reduction by allowing people to go elsewhere. And that's the reality. So I think people should think about that too, and looking at ways to reduce congestion by opening up so many other spots that just go unused. Our coastline is huge, but the percentage of spots that people can catch waves in is tiny, but the percentage of waves that just roll through unridden is massive. So that's why we're tapping into that and having a ball with it. So it's just perspective.
Love it. Well, thank you very much for your time, Paul.
No worries.
It's been a very interesting chat, and I think a lot of people are going to use the tips and tricks in here to try and help this sport just develop and grow. And I think it was responsible of you to take this time to try and teach people this, and I thank you for that.
No, you're welcome. Hopefully people got something out of it, and look forward to seeing you in Hood River, where we'll be amongst the thick of it.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm actually not even bringing a SUP this year, so it's just a little prone board, and we'll see what happens.
How much better is it traveling with a small prone board?
Oh yeah, that's literally the reason. Like, people are like, you're not bringing a SUP to Hood River, and I'm like, dude, you know how hard it is to travel with the SUP? And I'm doing a bit of traveling from there, going a few other places, but like, bringing a little 5-foot board and just right.
I went to Queensland the other day. It was just this little bag and the foil bag with the mast and stuff, and it nearly didn't go oversized.
Yeah.
No, she's like, we'll put it in oversized just to be thing. But I was like, this is so much better.
Love it.
So good. All right.
Well,
it's been a pleasure.
River, and thank you again.
No worries.
See you, mate.